Oh, wow.
So,
That's untouchable.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. The great one, obviously.
And the faster tempo is not maybe just a feature of a musical choice, but when they made those early recordings, they were on 78s and each side only had so many minutes to record. And sometimes they would just speed it up to make sure it all fit on one side of a 78 record.
Yeah, in my transcribing, the older recordings, they do so many weird things with the speed of the music. It'll be up a half step, up a semitone. I mean, a full, two steps up, because that's why it sounds so fast and like kind of tinny. Not just because the microphones were older.
well, didn't they off the topic for just a second, but wasn't there recently a thing about the original Robert Johnson blues recordings
Yeah.
that someone realized had been sped up slightly and the
Not slightly. It's up two steps.
right, and the key that everybody had been studying and learning, and they realized this is not what he had originally
Yeah, like
done.
an open A tuning, and then he's singing really high, kind of like superhuman style, and it's fast. So now his guitar playing is going fast. He's singing high. It's in the wrong key. Ah!
Interesting.
Wow.
So yeah, recording technology, with some of these recordings of Caruso connecting with this theater live form for the first time.
Yeah.
A couple of my notes here say that Caruso debuted at the Metropolitan Opera in 1903. And shortly after that, he signed a lucrative deal with the Victor Talking Machine Company, and really was maybe the first opera star to be, on these duplicated discs, and quickly, his fame spread around the world because you could buy a recording and put it on your new Victrola.
Wasn't he one of the most famous people in the world at that time?
Yeah, he was the Michael Jordan or the Muhammad Ali of his day, for sure.
Yeah, right.
He also, in terms of, I don't know what it is in today's dollars, but he got the top fee by far of anyone in opera. Like, he was one of the first ones, and his entourage, to demand incredibly high fees for the day.
And of
For
course,
his
he comes from a
performances.
hard scrabble Italian,
Yeah.
class background, right?
And then that's interesting about his making his debut that early, because then only a few short years later, there's the giant earthquake in San Francisco, 1906. And the Met was on tour in San Francisco when that happened. And he and the other Met performers are staying at the Palace Hotel on Market Street in San Francisco when the earthquake strikes. Of course, their tour was cut short, and it took them days to figure out how they're going to get out of the city and return to New York. They eventually did.
Wow. I read that Caruso vowed to never return to San Francisco after that incident, and he never did. So, just a quick question about comparing the Pavarotti version to the Caruso. What did you take out of that?
What do you think, Tima?
I think it's like there's no comparison. Nobody could possibly do it. As great as Pavarotti is, even if you're the greatest in the world and you get Caruso's throne, it's still Caruso's throne. It's like anybody who comes after Charlie Parker. It's just, that's it. It's Bird. You can get Bird's throne, but it's still Bird's throne. It's named after him. He's always going to be the greatest at it. There's something like the great one. It's something intangible. There's another element to it.
You know what I hear that's different, that strikes me, is that Caruso singing is much more muscular.
Yeah, right.
Than Luciano. And I remember Luciano always singing with the greatest ease. Like, he never had to force or never push but it sounds to me like Caruso, excitingly, is very muscular and athletic in his singing.
Athletic. That's the word. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Of course, it is an athletic art form to begin with. I mean, the great singers I've worked with all say it's comparable to running a marathon, that after a performance, your whole body has spent itself and perspired, and, it takes a lot of effort, just like an athlete, to make all that happen.
I heard an anecdotal story that after the autopsy of Caruso, they, of course, had to have a look at the vocal cords, and he had really abnormally large vocal cords. and they said the same of Mel Blanc's the Looney Tunes voiceover
Yeah.
guy, and he had vocal cords as big as Caruso's.
Wow, makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of singers I've worked with too have gigantic craniums, like much bigger heads than normal people.
Heads like crocodiles.
But frankly, that's what gives them so much extra like resonant chamber space.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the vocal cords get bigger like a muscle for exercise. Is that possible?
I think they do. I think they absolutely get
Freaky.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, again, you talk about in a guitar, the chamber of the guitar and how it resonates that sound. And here you just got the human body, the lungs and the diaphragm and the cranium to create that sound.
I know there's parts of my hands that have been transformed from 8 hours of practice every day for 40 years.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And I've seen,
For better and worse.
the violinists or the child prodigies that seem to have every finger is double jointed and seems to be
They always have a big bruise on their neck from holding the violin for a long time. That's how you know they're a violinist that practices a lot.
right. So now we move on to John Vickers, and John Vickers was a Canadian, and I saw that he's called a Helden tenor. And I think this would be a good time to talk about these different designations for singers. The women we've heard so far, one was a contralto, one was a soprano, and now
Mezzo soprano, right?
yeah, and then we've got tenors, and now we've got Helden tenor. Can you quickly just kind of explain to us, Peter, kind of what these designations mean?
Sure. So in the female ranges, the top voice is the soprano. She can sing the highest notes. The mezzo soprano, the range of a mezzo soprano is a little bit lower, so that sometimes a mezzo soprano has a high C, but not always, like a soprano does. So the whole, what they call the tessitura of the part, which is the actual range of from what note to what note I can sing, how many octaves, is variable. And the contralto is the very lowest in that range of female voices. They can sing the lowest notes, and they generally don't have the very high notes. And in the male category, tenor is the highest. Well, apart from countertenor, which we'll get to later, then comes baritone, which is the middle range, and then comes bass, which is the lowest range. But Helden tenor for John Vickers isn't really a designation of the range. It's just a designation of how much force those parts that are called Helden tenor parts require. And it really came about from German and specifically Wagner's repertoire, Richard Wagner, because he wrote demanding roles for tenors who, in some of his operas, it's insane how long they have to stay on stage and sing. Siegfried, for example, one of the operas that makes up the Ring of the Nibelungen, a 4-opera cycle. Siegfried is 5.5 hours long, and the tenor has to be on stage from the beginning to the end. So that's an amazing demand for anybody to sing for that many hours in a loud voice.
Wow, and that's just a baseline. Everyone has to be able to do that if they want that gig.
They do, yeah.
The other thing is in other forms of music, the singers are allowed to change the key of the song to suit their range.
Correct.
That's very common. And in this orchestral music, you're not doing that, are you?
No. I mean, very, very rare. Like in a concert, sometimes singers will change a key in a piece. But basically, when you perform the whole opera, you have to do it in the key it was written in.
Otherwise, you'd have to rewrite the whole orchestration.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you'd be taking instruments out of their ranges too, right? Because the orchestrations are all designed for the range of each instrument.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about the piece we're going to hear from John Vickers.
So he's going to sing What Harbor Shelters Peace from Benjamin Britten's opera Peter Grimes. Yeah, you'll hear it.
And Benjamin Britten was from Britain.
Yeah, an English composer.
Spelled differently, but
Exactly.
our first English composer here. All right, let's give a listen to John Vickers.